the movie Maestro. Did you see it?
Not yet. No.
Okay. It's remarkable how much Bradley looks like Leonard Bernstein. Remarkable. And he said, Matt, you're getting to look so much like Leonard Bernstein. I said, what makes you say it? Well, your nose is getting bigger. Your hair is white. I said, Leonard Bernstein should look like me when he was, if he'd have gotten to my age. He died in his 70s, you know.
So we have this here.
Is that the smokers?
Yeah, I think that's the smokers.
Let me take a look.
How come you have so many smokers in your paintings?
Is it?
You have a lot of people smoking.
He was 13 years older than I am, so you could imagine how I was influenced by all my older brothers and sisters. I was the youngest. And Nick, we all envied him because he retained a reputation even in Hoboken, New Jersey. 1939, I believe. He won the Prix de Rome. He was 21 or 22 years old, and I'm 9 years old. So that's the difference in age. And the town all looked at my family because of my brother. It became like the different Italian immigrant family that's involved with art and music. That's a good painting. That's the one at my house. You remember the wall?
Yeah, I know. That's why I picked it.
Surrounded by the fall.
Yeah, that's beautiful. This one.
Beautiful.
And these two.
This is a good wall.
Yeah.
This
is where the niche is. This is
yes, that's
these
great.
two, and then
It's on the side of this.
No, they're on here. This here. This one is here.
Yeah,
and then this one is here.
Gotcha. In 1951, Nick was out of service, and he wanted to go to Rome because in 1939 he had won the Prix de Rome. The war broke out in Europe, so they couldn't give him the trip to Italy. But after the war, they acknowledged it, so they gave him the trip to Italy. He was supposed to be studying with the teachers there, and he ended up teaching the teachers. This is a fact. In 1948, he receives a phone call, Nick does, from Jonas. Alexander Jonas was a famous surrealist dealer, and he liked Nick's work. He called Nick and said, listen, are you familiar with Matthew's work? And Nick said, of course. He said, well, he's leaving, he wants to leave New York, and he wants to go to Rome. He doesn't have a place, and he's broke. He said, can you put him up for a while? Nick said, send him over, I'm dying to meet him. He went to Rome. Nick was staying in Rome with his first wife and young child. Martha came, and he put him up, and it ended up being for 3 months, rather than a couple of days till he found the studio. So in that time, the relationship became very strong, and the influence of Martha and my brother was tremendous. All my studies were directly with my brother, constant. Every time we were sitting down for dinner, we were talking. He was talking about incidents that he had learned from a particular gallery he had been to, or an artist that he had seen, and why he thought they were so important, etc. And that always inspired me. So I'm constantly drawing also. And my brother would come visit me here when I was teaching school before I even had the gallery. There was a gallery at 617 East Las Solas called The Gallery, owned by Jack Harris and Lee Pointer. And they approached me and said, we've been hearing about your work, can we see it? And Jack Harris came and looked at what I'm doing. He said, you know, I like your work. Would you consider having a show with us? I said, I'd love it. And they did a show of my work and sold about 4 or 5 paintings. And that was, to me, incredible. And I said to Jack Harris, while I was still teaching, Jack, I said, if ever you should think of selling your half of the gallery, I would be interested. This is the kind of a arena I would like to be in. I never said a word because of his partner there, but he came to see me the next day at my house and said, I couldn't speak to you last night because I was negotiating another business I'm interested in, but I would like you to buy it for me because I know you would get along with Lee. And I said, how much? He said, $4,000. That was more than a year's salary that I was making as a teacher, more than a year's salary. And I said, sold. In 1962, I was getting successful, and I said to Nick, I called him, I said, I need now to make the next jump. I want to create a scenario for the artist to want to show with me. I had already known about Mata, hearing about Mata from Nick so much, and then looking at him, I identified with him immediately. I felt some energy about him that no one else had. I said, I'd like to give him a shot in the gallery. You think he would come with me? And Nick said, I think you're crazy. He said, Florida in 1962 was a desert. He said, who in Florida would even come to see? And Mata has no market. I said, I think I might be able to do something with him because I react to his way. He said, listen, if you'd like to meet him, I'll get in touch with him. He did. I was on the next plane to Paris, and then rent a car to his studio in Boissy, Saint-Savoie, is where he had a phenomenal studio. And I remember going there with my wife, and I remember the first time, getting out of the car, pulling up to the studio, he comes out, he has his hands on his hips like this, and he's looking at me walking toward him. He said, you look like your brother. He said, you're Nick's brother? As I got closer, he said, you're Nick's brother, you now my brother. That's his words. Those were his words. I felt so relieved. Your brother tells me you're interested in my work. I said, I really am. And I said, I'd like to buy one. He said, you really? He said, but there's no market for me. I said, I'd love to try. He said, I pulled out a couple of paintings because Nick said you were interested in owning one of my things. He said, these are two I really like, these two paintings. They're called 40 point. They're like approximately 30 by 40. And I looked at both of them. I said, Jesus, I wish I could afford both. I said, but I think I'll take this one. And my wife said, but I like that one. She said, no, maybe that one. So they were so good and close quality. We took the one. He said, okay. I said, I'd like to pay you for it now. He said, how much? He said, $1,000. He said, and if that's too much, make it $500. I said, no. I was just amazed at the reputation that he had attained. There's no market for him. It's so demeaning for me to pay just $1,000. I said, no. I said, $1,000 is a big deal for me. I ripped off the traveler's checks and I gave them. He said, okay, I know you like the other one. He said, take it back on consignment and we begin a relationship. And that was the beginning, 1962. I remember in 1968, I'm going back every 2 months, seeing. He was saying, who's buying these paintings? I was going back for paintings, 3, 4, 5 at a time. I was selling them. He said, you have sold more paintings than Max Clarat was a big dealer in Paris, of Max Clarat, Julian Levy in New York, Yolas in New York, Rome, Milano. He said, in 6 years, you have sold more painting than all of them put together. While I'm in Paris, I'm walking down the Boulevard Saint-Germain, and at the Dufleur or De Margot coffee shops, these little restaurants, I see Nick sitting at the table. I said, what the hell are you doing? He said, I decided to come. He had a place, he was living in his home in Todi, Rome. He said, I'm here just for a couple of days, just for a change to look at some shows. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to see Mata. He said, oh, terrific. I said, come with me tomorrow. He said, great. He came to me to the studio, and I have those pictures. And these pictures, at the moment these photographs were taken, he's talking to Nick about what he has in mind. And then I take the picture and I walk toward them. And Nick looks at me, he says, listen to what he has to say. Matt, I'm going to give you my whole collection to take. Everything. I want you to be my sole dealer and take everything to Florida for what you've done in the past 8 years. Everyone has a tinge of their past, but there's no mistake. No one would ever think this is about them. But the thing I understand that Federica knows, and it says to me all the time, you have continued his language. The language is meaning where it comes from. It's not something that's consciously done or executed. I can't consciously say, I'm going to do this shape there because it'll be right, nice and relating to this there, with this value there. I can't do that. I can't do that. It's automatic. It's unconscious. It becomes, at a point, subconscious, where you're still a bit detached from what you did. And then you consciously see what you did. You consciously see what you did in the unconscious. And then you use that and consciously discipline it by doing something else. So it's a play of conscious, subconscious, unconscious, back and forth of manipulation that finishes the painting. The end result is my narrative because it's coming automatically. I never know what a painting is going to end up looking at. This painting I just started here may tomorrow be completely different because I'm not happy with it right now. So I'm going to wipe out a lot of it. And then in the wiping out, I'm going to see something that I can change. In the wiping out. Not that I'm consciously going to do this, but in the wiping out, I'm looking to see what I've done. It's like looking at the clouds. You know I'm colorblind, you know that. And I see a big difference between there are whites that I use as a value. You can see them here. There are different values of white. I see, that's very sensitive to me, and I guess to all people who are colorblind. I see this as yellow. I'm not sure if this is yellow, burnt sienna, or orange. I'm not sure. It's cadmium red, okay? You could do that. You could see that. But I see it as a warm, very warm color. That's all. This is highly effective as a piercing color. I will do heads sometimes, and I think it's out of frustration with a painting I may be having like this. And I might sit down and get the paper and just, I must have 100 works on paper there that were just a relief from the painting, and I'll do maybe a head. It's always a head. And the head is never literal. That's more literal than most. But you see these. I don't think I've changed. I grew with my paintings. I have never been impressed or tried to change with the transition from the post-impressionist to the New York school. Didn't impress me. I was impressed with a few people in the New York school. Not everyone. I'm overly impressed with Pollock. Not in the beginning, but it grew on me until I understood it and saw his retrospective show at the Modern Museum. And then de Kooning, Gorky, the few. In 1962, sitting at the Café de Paris with my brother and Rico Donati, they were saying, it's all over. Abstract expressionism is dead. And I didn't understand what they said. I said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, there's a new movement called pop. And of course, I've learned now what these movements mean to me. They mean nothing to me. I continue my narrative regardless of what the new period is. And the new period, to me, to my finding, and as far as I'm concerned, are the result of a very few people who create the movement that are not artists. And I talk about Clement Greenberg, Colorfield, right? Leo Castelli, pop. My work has to be my own feeling. It has to come automatically. It may change, but I don't know if it's going to change. But if it does, I have to accept it. I'll see it. But I mean, there has been a change in my work since when I started working seriously as an artist and showing. Those things was influenced by little de Kooning, but mainly Franz Klein. When I think of those things and where I am today, there's a tremendous difference. Tremendous difference. But you could tell that the narrative, the way I'm going about it, is that I'm following my instincts. I'm not creating it. I'm following a thing somewhere that's forcing me to do things that I'm recognizing after I do it. It's that discovery. It's discovery.